Thanks, Michael, for joining in today. Uh, I think this fireside chat will be of great help to a lot of young developers and startup founders over here. I think what 0G is building is pretty incredible. The decentralized, AI application OS, that is being built. I think it's been enormous. You guys are making some great waves since last few months, and everyone is like super excited to hear how things are building on, and what sort of applications that we are going to see overall through this.
Thanks for having me. We're super excited as well, and definitely tried to make it a little bit cozy. So I've got a little bit of fur for a fireside chat. So I'm all prepared.
Awesome. Cool. So I think let's start with the first question. I think 0G has got an incredible run. You guys raised some good amount from some tier 1 VCs. But before that all started on, right, I think let's kickstart with what was the motivation factor for starting this decentralized AI OS sort of narrative, right? And I mean, the follow-up question to that is, and this is relatable to a lot of startup founders over here, is once you actually fixate on that problem, right, way before you come to the funding, what is the mental model that you have in mind to take this down the bigger problem ahead?
Yeah, it was interesting. It actually started with the team itself. I was running my Web2 startup at the time, and in late 2022, my now co-founder and former classmate Thomas Yao basically contacted me, and he said, "Hey, we've been investing in Web3 together basically since 2013, and I know you've been wanting to do something in this space. I invested in Conflux 5 years ago, and Ming and Fun are some of the best engineers that I've ever backed. Are you interested in chatting with them and potentially exploring to see if there's an opportunity to work together?" And I was kind of in a point in time where I was like, yeah, I've been working on my company for almost 10 years, and I've been thinking about doing something kind of really new with a phenomenal team. And then started chatting with Ming and Fun, and 6 months of co-founder dating later, I was like, wow, this is like the best engineers and computer scientists I've ever worked with. We need to start something together. So it really started with that core foundation of shared values, non-overlapping domain expertise. That was very important to me, because if everybody's like me, I don't think we're going to build like an amazing company. We need to have diversity in skill set and kind of viewpoints on the world. And so then once we formed the team, we basically said, now, how do we think about finding an idea? And we basically said it needs to be at the intersection of three things. One, we need to be passionate about it. Two, we need to have deep domain expertise in it. And three, it needs to be a major unlock for the space. And in this case, we were initially thinking kind of Web3 or maybe something AI focused. And then we began this whole process of starting to talk to people in the industry to see what are some of the biggest issues right now from an infrastructure standpoint. And initially, we heard about data availability being a major issue, because once you unlock that, and then basically any type of application can be built in a decentralized context, just like in a centralized context. And we especially saw that for very high performance type of applications, the DAs that were out in the market were only doing, let's say, 1 to 10 megabytes per second at the time. And the issue with that is you really need, tens of gigabytes per second if you want to compete with centralized systems like AWS, for example, or Google Cloud, to host some of these really high performance, high scaling type of applications. And so we said that seems like an interesting thing to hone in on and to target. And then as we were building it, we also realized that the whole AI wave started to happen. And we looked at basically the success of ChatGPT, and then we started thinking about a future, let's say 10 to 20 years from now, if we are going to have only centralized entities controlling this technology can basically automate, most of all processes within society. And then it becomes this kind of moral hazard argument where you give a lot of power to individual entities, and they eventually have more power than even nation states because they are controlling this technology. And so we said we need to have a counterbalance. And then we said, let's then focus our DA specifically on AI applications. And it just so happens that actually Ming built the foundation in his spare time already. The zero-G storage network is the foundation. And then we architected the DA layer in such a way that it was performant enough to compete with things like InfiniBand and data centers, which are anywhere from 40 gigabytes to 400 gigabytes. And so those were really the intellectual underpinnings of how we went about it. And then we said, okay, we naturally need to build more layers of the stack to then actually fully compete with somebody like an OpenAI, because which ironically actually is closed AI, because you have no idea where the data came from, who labeled it, what happens to the data along the entire path, what version of the model you're getting, were there any data injection attacks, is the model misbehaving in production? You know, none of that. You're trusting a single entity to do all of that work for you. And we know that can go pretty horribly wrong. And a lot of people are really worried about this idea that AI one day wakes up and says, I don't need humans in the loop anymore. And so we basically said, we've got the domain expertise. We're super passionate about this space. On the domain expertise point, Ming actually wrote some of the first AI algorithms for Microsoft Bing. And so we were quite passionate about kind of the intersection of both industries. And then Fan was behind a lot of papers around scalability of blockchains, so and security, so marrying a lot of those two viewpoints together. And then finally, it's going to be a major unlock for the space because blockchain and AI are the future technology platforms that applications will be built on. So bit of a long answer, but I wanted to give a lot of context so people understood kind of the process that we went through and how we thought about then building and how we actually used what we were hearing from the market to then build not only the product around it, but then also the team around it.
Amazing. Yeah. I think it's quite a thorough approach. And I think definitely, if founders, for some instances, go onto that kind of a path where it's a very, thesis driven, thought through on where you want to go ahead, then I think it just makes it easy, for everyone. Now, coming down, to the zero gravity, sort of ecosystem, right? I think there's a lot of supply and demand, side of it, because I think it's most likely like the Apple iOS store or like Google Play Store, where you'll have like tons of other applications and the early days of Windows and Mac, right? So the next question is, I think there are a lot of moving parts of moving variables in terms of different partnerships, that goes on to it, right? And obviously, I think once the funding is announced, it's relatively easy because people have that sort of respect, coming in. But for your first initial few partners, how was the BD strategy more revolved around it? Was it more like you guys were selling the vision of what you're building and then asking some of the bigger giant players, to take a deeper look and help with all the logistics part of it? Or was there any certain other specific approach? The reason I'm asking is because a lot of founders in different segments, whether it's in terms of DeFi or infra or anything, when they start doing some partnerships with the bigger protocols, there's a lot of resistance in those initial days. So how do you overcome, from that particular angle?
Yeah, I'm very much influenced by a former professor of mine called Steve Blank. He is the father of the Lean Launchpad or Lean Startup movement. He teaches at Stanford, and his whole approach was about get outside of the building. If you're still figuring out product market fit, it's not a sales conversation because you have no idea what the end person wants. So the way I structured those initial conversations is I was basically just saying, hey, I'm just here to learn. Like, what are the most important things that you're facing? What are some of the key challenges that you're facing? What's on your mind? How are you thinking about the space? And just very much of I see you, as a mentor, tell me how things are evolving in the space and what I should know. And generally, people are very happy to do that. They're happy to provide advice. They're happy to give you a perspective on the space, because I didn't approach it with like, hey, we have a product, you need to buy it from us. It's like, I don't know what to build, help me figure this out together. So it's a very different approach, because when you're selling, you're basically assuming that you know what the other person wants. And so with that approach, we spent a good amount of time early on with the Polygon co-founder Sandeep and some of his kind of staff around him, like Kenzie and so on. And that's how we really also then understood more deeply what the DA problem was. And then they became our first design partner in this journey. So that was a major first win for us early on because I approached it from that perspective. It was much more relationship driven, much more advisory driven.
Got it. The next question, Michael, is in terms of the fundraising part, and I think founders at every stage, it's an imperative task, because at one side you're building product, you're serving the community, you're getting like all the BD, all the other things, and then the funding is very essentially because you want to keep running the boat, going along. I think Zero Gravity has raised $35 million till now, and hopefully we are going to see some bigger PR news for the next round that is coming in, and also through the node sale, which I think is going to be like a big hit as well coming in. So what is your advice in those initial first days? I'm pretty sure when you started pitching out to people, there were a lot of instances where people said, hey, no, or there was some sort of resistance coming in from that. So how do you deal with that? How was your fundraising journey process as well? I mean, those initial few checks, I think would love to deep dive more into that.
Yeah, this can definitely be the conversation of multiple hours of like fireside chats. But even for our accelerator, I spent an hour just kind of giving high level the kind of the 5 key elements of the things that helped me during the fundraise. But I could have gone much deeper and much longer than that hour. But fundamentally, the early stage of a fundraise is really about gaining momentum. Because that momentum will then help you drive more investors to a close, because then they realize there's something that's ongoing. And if I don't participate, I'm going to lose my chance to be part of something big. So the momentum is really key. And how do you get momentum? You need friendly 1, 2, 3 early term sheets that then basically say like, hey, we believe in you. We've done our homework. We think that this is a solid founder. And once you have that in place, then chatting with some other, let's say, if they weren't, let's say, tier 1 investors, you can then start chatting with tier 1 investors and say like, hey, I've got this momentum behind me now. We need you to make a decision in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's how you get momentum. And one of the mistakes I see as part of that momentum that a lot of founders do is they say, I'm raising X amount at Y valuation. The issue with that is that sometimes investors have very strict cutoffs, and they're basically like, that Y valuation, like I like the founder, but that's too high for me right now. And so then they're mentally already disconnect because they feel like it's not the right fit for my fund. But instead, what you want is forget about the valuation part. You can negotiate all of that later. It's more about how do I get to yes, and how do I find the partner that I can see myself working with in the future. So the optimization early on is for a number of term sheets, is not for valuation. Because once you have a certain amount of term sheets and tier 1 funds coming in, then you can start optimizing for valuation later, versus the other way around. So most founders kind of get it backwards. So that's a really key thing to think about. I mean, usually founders, the reason why they do it is because funds will ask them like, what are you raising at? And one of the key things that I did is like, well, we're happy to raise at what's market, but it needs to be reasonable for our stage, for our team, and so on. And then we kind of put it back onto the investor to say like, yeah, I think this is worth, X amount. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Why don't you write us a term sheet and then we can chat more about it. So then it's really about gaining momentum first versus excluding investors on the basis of valuation.
I think that's some incredible input, and I think I concur with you on this point as well. I think it's more of the relationship journey, the valuations, the fundraising amounts. I think it comes at a later part because see, if anyone wants to come at X valuation, they will also come at Y, right? It's not the question of valuation, but it's more about how do I trust this founder, and I mean, it's there. These guys can execute the vision, but on certain parts, how that relationship grows over a period of time as well. So I think
Yeah,
it's
and
incredible input. Yeah.
yeah, thanks for that. And one additional point to that is we actually started by saying we wanted to raise 5 million in our round, because the way I calculated it is basically if we have X amount of people working on the product and we need some kind of ecosystem marketing support, what's going to give me 2 years of runway? And so that's how we derived the 5 million. And we thought that was a very reasonable ask. And then as that started getting very oversubscribed, then we can start raising also the threshold of funds that we raise. And that's a really great place to be in, because the more oversubscribed you are, the more hype there will be and more momentum there will be around your fundraise. And so again, it's very much a momentum game. So if you say, I really want to raise 20 million because it'll give me 5 years of runway, maybe think about raising a smaller amount just to get to higher momentum initially.
Got it. I think coming, down to the 0G, sort of use cases, which are being built on. I think, we are very excited, and I think a lot of founders have, some questions, because we were getting in, hey, can we build this sort of use case, or can we use this tech stack, to have this application built around it and stuff. We'll also deep dive once we invite, founders to the main stage, but would love to hear from you. What are those crazy use cases, that you have seen, and that is like, hey, this is what this platform was built for, that sort of satisfaction that came in through.
Yeah, it's really focused on the idea of high performance use cases initially. We wanted to basically remove any of the barriers between what you can build on centralized system versus decentralized systems. So initially that was in the form of, if we have enough data throughput, then you can do things like on-chain gaming, for example, or high frequency DeFi, on-chain order books, because you have enough data throughput and enough kind of transaction volume that you can support these types of use cases now. So we do have some of those use cases that other people have built on top of zero gravity. So for example, on the gaming side, it'd be things like Blade Games and Shrapnel using our infrastructure. On the kind of DeFi side, it'd be things like Cygnus and various others that are starting to do more kind of AI-based inference type of DeFi. So there's definitely room for those types of use cases. But then fundamentally, what we also saw and what we think is that in the next 5 to 10 years, every company is going to be an AI company. And so the use cases that are predominantly being built on top of us right now are very much AI related. And so initially, it's very much AI infrastructure related. So things like, how do we support kind of synthetic data aggregation, or how do we support data labeling and cleaning at scale? How do we support model builders like Sentient, for example? How do we support AI inference without having much overhead, so that you can build exactly the same level of applications that you could by doing an API call to OpenAI, for example? So philosophically, that's the type of things that we really want to unlock. And use case wise, I think we're starting to there's even some space based satellite communication networks that I want to start using our infrastructure, which we're like super excited about, because this is the type of stuff that I want to see creative exploration around. Whether it's AI type of use cases for utilizing private data, or if it's AI type of use cases for maybe running a logistics system, or use cases for running space kind of networks for enabling connectivity worldwide for countries that can't afford to pay for Starlink, for example. I mean, those are super cool use cases that we're starting to see pop up. We have about 300 plus kind of companies building on top of our infrastructure. We've crossed about 10 million transactions recently per day. So it's been super fun to see that journey.
Super excited to see the next set of use case, and hopefully I think we'll start. I think you guys will start documenting this, and again, it would be set of inspiration for a lot of developers out there. Last question before we let everyone out for questions is, uh, which added, this while I think you're very bullish on the India ecosystem as well. And I think, I'm seeing, I think 15 or 18 city events which are lined up. And I'm getting this all, messages that, hey, this is like really cool thing, why didn't you guys told us prior, we could have caught some other folks and stuff like that. But yeah, I think people are like super excited to see in India as well what Zero Gravity is building. Would love to know your long term thoughts as well, specific for this geography.
We're super excited to kick off our first all India roadshow, and Gathan, our developer relations person, is essentially running all of it by himself, of course, with the help of our ecosystem team. So really grateful for all their great work. And India, of course, is a very large country, and so can't just go to one city and expect a bunch of people to show up. It has to really be an all India tour. And we chose India specifically because we haven't really done this in other geographies yet, um, because of the density of really high, strong developer talent in India. And so we thought, why don't we inspire that developer talent to build on decentralized infrastructure and build with kind of the latest technologies that are available in this decentralized AI operating system world. And so that was really our thought. And that's why we chose India first. And we wanted to make sure that developers across the country can leverage the technology. And so we made it a big road tour. And it's definitely not the last one that we're doing. So expect to see a lot more of us in India. And we're really excited to see what use cases come out of India. Definitely learned a lot from, for example, Sandeep as well from Polygon around how he approached developer onboarding. And so, again, very thankful to him for being one of our first design partners as well.
All right, thanks, Michael. I think